Wizards, AJ DeBonsa trade possibilities, lots of news floating out there. Will Dawkins actually spoke at the Combine yesterday. We'll have some of that sound for you on the show today. Jason, by the way, is talking about the official announcement this morning that Washington will play the Colts in London on October 4th. Of course, I've seen the rumors of it the last couple of days, but I put out my mock schedule 1 week ago today, and I had Washington on my mock playing Indianapolis in London on October 4th. Swear on my three boys, I didn't know or hear anything. That's why I put it out early last week. I put it out on Wednesday because I knew the rumors were going to start flying over the weekend, and I just wanted to make sure I was clear of all of that so that I didn't have any information when I put my mock schedule out. Total guess, as is my entire mock schedule, which also includes an early bye week the following week, October 11th, after the Indy game in London. I feel confident now that I might get that one right as well. Of course, getting them right's never been the point of this. Never really the point at all. It's a bit, people. 16, 17 years running, I've been doing a mock schedule. It was initially done really because I actually used to fool around and try to play schedule maker on my own time. But everybody was doing mock drafts. Nobody was doing mock schedules, and it was mostly done tongue-in-cheek. The most I think I've ever gotten right is 4, maybe, which I would say is pretty hard to repeat. But I'm off to a good start with Indy in London on the correct date, and maybe the bye week correct as well. My opener, for those of you who have not seen my mock schedule, is at Philadelphia on September 13th, Sunday, in the late afternoon window. And we know that they're not playing. The Eagles aren't playing the Cowboys, and they're not playing the Giants because they're playing each other on Sunday Night Football. We'll see how it shakes out come tomorrow night. There may be other games announced. We now have something like 12 or 13 games that have been officially announced, including the entirety of the international slate. We knew about 49ers Rams week 1 on that Thursday night following Seattle opening up the season on Wednesday night, September 9th. First ever game in Australia. It'll be in Melbourne, San Francisco, and the Rams. We knew about Ravens and Cowboys in Brazil week 3. By the way, that's a late afternoon game. That's a 4:25 game in week 3. The week 1 game is a Thursday night game. It'll be played, I think it's late morning, early afternoon, Australia time, on Friday the 11th for them. So we knew about those 2 games, and now we know the rest of the schedule internationally. There are 9 games internationally this year, the most ever. The London stretch starts on October 4th with Washington hosting the Colts. The following week, it's Jacksonville for the first of back-to-back weeks playing in London. The Jags will. And some of you really thought there was a chance Washington could play 2 consecutive weeks in London. I didn't mock it that way. I considered it. I didn't do it. In part because last year when Minnesota did it, the quid pro quo really for them doing it was they got 2 road games played in neutral sites. Teams don't necessarily like to be in Europe for 2.5 weeks, which is exactly what it would be if you played back-to-back games. Jacksonville's been sort of London's team since the series started. They're going to play Philadelphia the week after Washington plays Indy in London. Washington's game is at Tottenham Spurs Stadium. So the Eagles will play the Jags October 11th. And then the following week, the Jags are going to host the Texans in a divisional matchup, in an AFC South matchup in week 6 on October 18th. All 3 of those games are 9:30 a.m., the Sunday morning stretch. And we get 6 Sunday morning games in 2026. Those first 3 in London. And then on October 25th, the first ever game in France, the Saints are hosting the Steelers in Paris. That's a 9:30 Eastern kick. And then November 8th, Bengals and Falcons in Madrid. Second straight year in Madrid, the NFL is playing. And then for, I think, the third consecutive year, they'll play a game in Munich, in Germany, November 15th. That game, Patriots and Lions. And then the final international game will be Vikings 49ers in Mexico City on November 22nd. That will be a Sunday. That'll be obviously not a Sunday game. That will be a Sunday night game, a Sunday morning game. It's not going to be obviously in Mexico City. It'll be a Sunday night game. Mexico City, I spent some time there last summer. What a spectacular city that has become. Probably one of the 2 or 3 best food cities on the planet. So the 49ers and Vikings will finish off the international slate Sunday night, November 22nd. So, by the way, that means that neither one of those two teams will be involved in any of the Thanksgiving Day games. You know, Washington plays both of those teams. So there was a possibility after Philadelphia Dallas was announced at 4 for the 4:25 Thanksgiving Day game that Washington could have still played a Thanksgiving night game against, the Vikings or the 49ers, but they're playing in Mexico City on the Sunday night leading into Thanksgiving week. They're not going to then turn around and have either one of those two teams play on Thanksgiving night. So there you go. I think also, and Tommy brought this up to me the other day, and I think it's a fair point, that with the Eagles and Cowboys playing, it's doubtful that another NFC East team would then play Thanksgiving night. It's not impossible, but we now know that, at least 4 potential opponents for Washington on Thanksgiving Day are taken off the table in Philadelphia, Dallas, the 49ers, and the Vikings. So there you go. That's the international slate. I don't know if there are more games scheduled to be announced today officially. That may be it. I'll tell you what, with all of the rumors out there and all of the leaks, and you're really not, able to decide what's real and what isn't, like, it certainly would appear that there are enough leaks in advance of some of these games that have come to fruition. This guy, NFL Nerd, I follow him. I mean, he's had some of these games a day or a day and a half in advance. At this point, they ought to just put the schedule out tonight, because it seems to me like the last few years, by the time we've gotten to the schedule release, especially the day of, pretty much somebody's leaked the entire schedule. They ought to just put it out like today, just put the whole thing out. Of course, they've got to have programming around it, but have the NFL Network and ESPN standing by. Tough for them to stand by when they've got, I guess, playoff games, hockey, and the NBA as it relates to ESPN. There's a game tonight on ESPN, 8 o'clock. I guess Thursday night there are no NBA games, and the NHL games on Thursday night. I guess the ESPN could put it on ESPN too, either the hockey or the schedule. I have no idea. The schedule will clearly outrate any hockey game, playoff game, by miles. But there you go. One game for the 2026 slate is now official. They are going to play the Indianapolis Colts in week 4 in London at 9:30 a.m. Eastern. And my guess is, because more often than not, teams get their bye week when they come back from Europe or come back from an international game. The bye week would be the following week. And it's also possible my week 3 mocked game was a Thursday night game in the Meadowlands against the Giants. That gives them plenty of time to, get ready for the London trip. We'll see how it shakes out. You never know. Going to be fun to see the schedule come out and start, looking at what games. And it's really, we know the games, obviously. We've known the games since the regular season ended. Once the regular season ended, we knew exactly who the opponents were going to be, all 17 of them. We actually knew 14 of the opponents before the season ended. We knew 14 of the opponents before last year began. I can tell you who the 14 of the 17 opponents are going to be for 2027. The NFL's already got that out there, but it's the three additional games that need to be determined based on placement in the final standings, and that's why you have to wait until the end of the season to get all 17. But how they get laid out, how many prime times, where's the London trip, et cetera, what does it look like in terms of division games? Last year they had, a lot of those division games, remember, bunched into the end of the season. They finished Giants, Eagles, Cowboys, Eagles. I hated, before the schedule came out last year, that the rematch of the NFC Championship game was going to have to wait until week 16 because there was a chance it wasn't going to mean anything. And as it turns out, it didn't mean anything. It would have been much bigger, I think, for a Washington-Philadelphia situation for that game to have, the first game anyway, to have been played much earlier in the season. But, remember Dan Quinn decided with, basically nothing to play for. He decided that the season-ending stretch against the Giants, Eagles, Cowboys, and Eagles would be like the NFC East tournament, like bracket style, survive and advance. And they beat the Giants in the first game. He's like, survive and advance. And then they lost to the Eagles and the Cowboys in back-to-back games before beating the Eagles in the final game of the year. Yeah, it doesn't work that way, unfortunately. But and if you were really trying to win that tournament, wouldn't you have played Jaden Daniels? Which they didn't. They sat him for the final 4 games of the year. So we'll keep you posted on any schedule news that comes out. But it's going to keep kind of leaking out. And I'm telling you, by the time the schedule show comes out tomorrow night, we're going to know somebody will have leaked a significant portion of the schedules. It seems every year to me, I could be wrong about this, it seems like either the Giants or the Jets schedule gets released. Like in New York, somebody's got access and they put these things out. And when we see the Giants schedule, we know, where the 2 games against the Giants will be. And then somebody leaks a Philly schedule and we know where the 2 Philly games are going to be. And by the time everything gets leaked, it seems like, that's when ESPN and the NFL Network hit the air for their schedule show. All right. Man, is Victor Wembanyama different? I don't know what to say about this guy. Like, he is changing the game before our very eyes. We've never seen anything like him. Never. Last night in Game 5 in a series knotted at 2 games apiece, Spurs and Timberwolves in the Western Conference semifinals, a game after Wemby had been tossed for a vicious elbow and an intentional elbow at Naz Reid. He was back. I saw some of the pregame conversation before the game last night, and some of the former players were saying if that was reversed, Naz Reid would be suspended. If Naz Reid had thrown the elbow at Wemby and gotten tossed from the game, he would have been suspended for the next game and would have been fined severely. There was no fine, and Wemby wasn't suspended from the next game. The only thing I would say about that, and I think I talked up a little bit about it after he got tossed the other night, was he got tossed early enough in the game, it was early in the second period, that essentially, missing the last 2 and almost the last 3 quarters served as the suspension. But it's probably not that crazy to assume that had it been the other way around, had Naz Reid, first of all, he'd have to jump up with his elbow to hit Wemby above the neck. I mean, this dude is 7'5" with a wingspan that goes to 9'7". 9'7". If you haven't watched him play, you have to watch him play because of the absolute circus act, part of it. We've never seen anything like Victor Wembanyama. Never. Like, he's 7'5" with a 9'7" wingspan. That's where he reaches to. He can shoot threes. He can dribble like a guard. He is an absolute dominant rim protector. It's impossible not to have your shot influenced by him at the rim. And last night in this game, he went for 27 points, 17 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 blocked shots. Didn't have an assist. Didn't have a steal. That's the only thing he didn't have. He's a great passer, too. When he posts up, not on the low block, but he'll post up right around the elbow or just outside the lane. Literally, he can turn over a smaller defender, everybody is smaller, and reach his arm with the basketball in his hand from about 11 feet-ish from the basket and lay it in. His wingspan reaches to 9'7". His reach, though, gets to the point where he can just sort of flick it and lay it in. It's nothing like we've ever seen in that sport. Nothing. He's an absolute new thing that hasn't been seen on this stage. And they're up 3-2. I think they'll win this series. I'm really rooting for Minnesota. I love the way they play. They were down 18 in the first half, tied it up in the third quarter, and then San Antonio went on a run and put them away. Do I think there could be a seventh game? Could Minnesota win Game 6 Friday night? They could. They get a little bit of rest here from a Tuesday night to a Friday night. They've been going every other day here recently, but they're setting that up for a Friday night and a potential Game 7 on Sunday. So I think Minnesota can win at home in Game 6, but I'm not going to be surprised if San Antonio ends it. And then we will have one of the most anticipated, and it will be one of the most hyped conference finals series we've seen in a long time. San Antonio in their first year in the playoffs with Wemby against the reigning NBA champion Oklahoma City Thunder. It's really amazing to look at what a prohibitive favorite Oklahoma City is right now. They were a massive favorite to win the title the other day. I'm going to just pull it up real quickly to see if that's changed at all. Yeah, they're a little bit less of a favorite right now, but they are still a minus 190 favorite. That's kind of, I'm looking at it right now. I see a minus 200. I see a minus 165. Just call it minus 180, somewhere around there. Favorite to win the title. San Antonio's plus 340. You could have gotten San Antonio a couple of days ago at plus 450, I think it was. So those numbers are coming down. That will be an amazing series. And San Antonio won 4 of the 5 games they played against Oklahoma City during the regular season. I don't really think that matters much because I think the playoffs are so different. But I'll tell you what, man, San Antonio is getting some playoff experience in this series against Minnesota in terms of what playoff basketball is like, the physicality difference, the intensity difference, the road atmosphere. They're more than surviving it. It looks like they got a pretty good chance to advance. We'll see. I'd love to see a 7th and deciding game. San Antonio was a 9.5-point favorite last night. Max, I'm on a little bit of a roll after the brutal start to betting the NBA playoffs in the first round. Like I've had the Spurs now in their last 2 home games laying the big number because I liked. I'm sorry, in game 2 I had them in game 2 laying the big number, and then I had them last night laying the big number as well. Also had the Knicks the other night when I think a lot of people thought maybe the Sixers would be able to, get back into it. And they blew them out. Favorites, who knew? Not usually my way, but I've been laying some points in some of these games. By the way, speaking of points or runs, man, the Nats just know how to generate offense. Last night, 10 more runs. And a 10-4 win in the first of 3 against the Reds on the road. That gets them back to within 2 of 500. They were within a game of 500 before they lost back-to-back games to the Marlins over the weekend. Last night, we had Garcia Jr. with 2 home runs, Lyle with 2 home runs, James Wood with a homer. The ball was flying out of the park. Wood actually opened the third inning, the scoring for the Nats with a home run. 10-4 was the final. 13 hits. The Nats, among right now the leading scoring teams in all of baseball. In the National League, they are second behind the Atlanta Braves in runs scored. And they played the same amount of games. And they're just 1 run behind. No, they've moved ahead of the Yankees. They are now the second highest scoring team in baseball behind the Atlanta Braves through 42 games. So the sample size is getting a little bit larger now. You're at 42 games, so you're more than a quarter of the way through the season. And they're the second highest scoring team in baseball. Their bullpen, not so good. Their starting pitching, not exactly great, but they are 20-22, tied for second in the National League East. Good for them. All right. There was some conversation, a lot of it, after the Wizards got the number 1 pick on Sunday. Yesterday at the Combine, sort of from Will Dawkins, the general manager, talking about A.J. DeBonsa. There's been some reporting out there as well. We'll get to all of that next on the Kevin Sheehan Show. The Team 980, theteam980.com. We are free and live on the Odyssey app. Don't forget you can watch this show on the Team 980's YouTube channel. Just hit the subscribe button and hit the like button when you get there. So I saw this yesterday and I was like, really? Didn't really think about him. Haven't thought about him for a long time. But Jan Vesely, do you remember Jan Vesely? Selected number 6 overall by the Washington Wizards in the 2011 draft. Jan Vesely announced yesterday that he will be retiring from basketball at the end of this current La Liga season. He has had a very long international career and a very successful international career. He was a EuroLeague champion in 2017. He was the EuroLeague MVP in 2019. He's been a 3-time All EuroLeague first team player. He is a 4-time Turkish Super League champion, whatever the hell that means. He's had a very successful international career since leaving the NBA in 2014 after the Denver Nuggets gave him a chance after the Wizards. I forget if they cut him loose or if they traded him to the Nuggets. It doesn't really matter. The pick was a disaster. Jan Vesely was picked in that 2011 draft. The draft where after he was picked, Kawhi Leonard was selected 15th overall. Jimmy Butler was selected 32nd overall, or 30th overall, as the final pick in the first round. Ernie was not great at drafting. Ernie was not terrible at trading, though, but sometimes it was the trade that put out the fire that he started with some bad drafting. But Jan Vesely said in his statement on social media, after many unforgettable years, the time has come to close the chapter of my basketball journey. From Belgrade to Istanbul to Barcelona, and he plays with Barcelona, FC Barcelona right now. I was privileged with countless battles, outstanding teammates, coaches, most loyal fans, many victories and tough losses, a whirlwind of emotions and a collection of memories that will stay with me forever. I gave everything I had to the game, and it gave me even more in return. I leave with gratitude and pride, closed quote. No mention of any of his NBA days. That first year he averaged like 4 points a game. And, I was kind of going through some of the box scores just to see if he had like a night in which we all said, ooh, okay. No, there really wasn't one. There really wasn't a night. I think his high point total came at the very end of the season, his rookie year, where he had 16 points. That was it. And then, he was with the Wizards the next year and averaged even fewer points per game and got even fewer minutes per game and did nothing. And then that third year, he ended up in Denver. After starting the season in Washington, he ended up in Denver. And didn't do much in Denver either. Different game, young player, very young player. In 2011, Jan Vesely was just 20 years old when Washington drafted him. But if you didn't know, he had one hell of an international career and was the one-time EuroLeague MVP. I didn't know that. All right. Will Dawkins yesterday at the NBA Combine was interviewed by ESPN. There are a couple of sound bites that I wanted to play for you. First of all, he weighed in on sort of the rebuilds that he's been a part of in Oklahoma City and now in Washington. This was Will Dawkins on the Oklahoma City rebuild.
Sam Presti, shout out to D3 Hoops, Hank Smith at Emerson College. We had done multiple rebuilds there as well. So when you bring in a Travis Schlenk, a Michael Winger, myself, we've been in different places, get an opportunity to do it here. You definitely learn from the places you've been and try to emulate some things that are happening. I think you see their success right now and the depth and the connectivity of the team and the cohesion and how long they've been together to grow and make those steps is something you want to emulate. But they're the cream of the crop of the league for a reason right now. We're just getting started, but we like what we have and how bonded they are and how connected they are.
I want to point out that, this rebuild, and we talked a lot about it yesterday and the day before, these 3 years, I emphasized yesterday that, those that sort of feel like getting number one is the culmination of the rebuild. My personal opinion, you have it all wrong. This is still in phase one of the rebuild. Like the actual culmination comes when they hopefully become a consistent upper echelon winning NBA franchise over a period of years. And they've got a roster and they've got, a salary structure and they've got picks. Oklahoma City's in amazing shape. And not only do they have, a championship roster right now, they also have picks galore, including picks coming up in the upcoming draft. Remember, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, I think on the verge of being a two-time MVP, was not drafted by Oklahoma City. They traded for Shai back in 2020, 2019, 2020, whenever it was. And that was part of the Paul George trade, where the Clippers, got Paul George and sent the Thunder, a bunch of picks, the SGA, and it just ended up being an absolute, perfect trade and became sort of the backbone. So, yes, the pick in June could be the player that becomes the MVP candidate that leads the Wizards to championship contention over a period of several years. But that player also could come based on a trade that they make with all of the assets they've been accumulating. I mentioned yesterday, the player they pick, if they pick a player, they may trade, who knows? The player they pick will be the 8th player in 4 drafts on their roster selected in the first round. That is a pretty cool young nucleus. 14 players under the age of 24. They have 13 currently. But, now they have used assets which beget other assets, which beget, players like Trae Young and Anthony Davis to, infuse some veteran talent and leadership into this thing so that they can start to actually play meaningful basketball, which is what they're planning on doing next season, in October of this year, so that they can actually really develop their players in a much more conducive developmental environment, which is one in which you're trying to win games and the opponent knows you're trying to win games. But no, the number one pick was not a culmination of anything. It was the culmination of phase one. Phase two is to find out whether or not these guys are good at picking players. We don't know that yet. That's a TBD. And then phase three is, did they pick the right players and did they develop the players correctly? Are the players coached the right way? And now are they actually a legitimate contender? Are they winning 50-plus games, and are they finishing consistently in the top 3, 4, 5 of the Eastern Conference? That's when this thing, is the end that will know whether or not it justified the means. Now, again, I'm never going to change the way I felt about what they've done. I think this is the only way teams like the Wizards can give themselves at least a chance. And I think the first part of this, they've done pretty well. They have, again, 7 players currently drafted in the first round, under the age of 24 right now, really under the age of 23 in terms of those 7 players. Over a 3-year period, they'll add to that in this upcoming draft in terms of young talent. Because whatever they trade, if they were to trade, they're still going to end up picking a player and picking a player relatively early in the draft, even if they decide to trade back. I don't think they're going to do that, by the way. But somebody does, and we'll tell you who that is coming up here in a moment. Anyway, this was Will Dawkins yesterday on the state of the Wizards' current rebuild.
And we didn't want to be a team that hops in the playoffs one time. Like, whenever we get there, we want to be there for a long time and be able to play sustained competitive basketball. And when we get there, and that's on kind of the development of the players.
Yeah. So that's on not only the development of the players, it's on, did they get the right players to develop? And, you look at their roster, and if you've been paying attention, and I know most of you haven't, look, I'm a massive fan of this team, and I haven't paid as much attention over the last 3 years. It's been a difficult slog, no doubt. But do they have players on their current roster that can be all-stars? Yes. Do they have a player or more than one that can be all NBA first or second teamers, putting them in the conversation of sort of top 5 players in the league? I would say personally, and there's a long way to go on all of these guys because they're so young, I would say I don't see that on their current roster. But can they acquire that or can they pick it in this next draft? We'll see. But I don't think that the players they've picked are bad players. I think they're good players. I'm very, very intrigued with what Alex Sarr is going to become. I think he has all-star potential. I think Will Riley and Trey Johnson have all-star potential. I felt that way for a while about Keyshawn George. I haven't changed my opinion. Koulibaly is really a good basketball player, a really good defensive player, and really getting better and descending more as an offensive player. Cam Whitmore's got a lot of upside. Bub Carrington, all of these guys. Do I see, though, like a future MVP candidate? I don't today. If I had to wager today, is anybody on the Wizards roster today, before they pick a player in 2026 in June, next month, or is anybody here an actual MVP candidate somewhere down the road? I would bet no, but I would bet on a couple of all-star possibilities. I would say that the player that has the best chance to be in an MVP conversation would be 33-year-old Anthony Davis next year or the year after. Now, that's, contingent on a huge if he's healthy and plays a lot of games. Well, the first if would be if he's actually on the roster. And then it would be if he's healthy enough to play 65 plus games. He is certainly capable, as we have seen in previous years, of being in that conversation as one of the best two-way players of the last decade. But yeah, that's the key. I mean, this is getting number one. It would have been better to get number one last year. I mean, I think it would have been maybe Debonsa, maybe, Peterson, maybe Boozer. I don't think it's going to be Boozer, but maybe Acuff Jr. Maybe one of those players ends up being a lot better than Cooper Flagg down the road. It's really hard to predict, but the fact that they got some luck and bucked the odds, they had a 14% chance of getting number one. It didn't feel like an ending to me. It felt exciting in the moment. It gives them flexibility. It gives them an opportunity. But the probability that number one overall is going to end up being a top 5 superstar player is less than 50-50 if you look at, the history of number one overall. But we'll see if they are really good at evaluating talent, picking the talent, and then developing the talent. So the general manager, Will Dawkins, had something to say about one of those players at the top of the draft. You'll hear what he said about A.J. Debonsa when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. During the break, I looked up the details of that SGA trade. 2019, July of 2019, Clippers and Thunder. The Clippers got Paul George, and the Thunder got SGA, Gallinari, a 2021 first-round pick, a 2022 first-round pick. That became Jalen Williams, by the way. A 2023 first-round pick, a 2023 pick swap, a 2024 first-round pick, a 2025 pick swap, and a 2026 first-round pick. That's the kind of flexibility that Winger, Dawkins, Schlenk, the whole group, they're building towards something like this. They may pick AJ DeBonsa number one, and he may end up being the superstar, but it's possible that they could end up, now they don't have Paul George, but they could end up with a big offer for Anthony Davis at some point. Or they're, having a veteran asset that could be a key to a championship run for a championship contender could bring back a haul. We'll see how it plays out. I like the way it's played out so far. I talked about it yesterday that, over these 3 years, losing 196 games has produced 7 players picked in the first round from 3 drafts. There will be even more after this upcoming draft. They have 8 first-round picks and 12 second-round picks over the next 7 drafts. They've used picks and players to acquire assets and then turn those assets into other assets, like Anthony Davis and Trae Young. The Bradley Beal trade kind of started all of this. The Chris Paul trade was big. They've done this well. There is a level of, true competence. They've done it before. They went through it in Oklahoma City. This is what you wanted when they set, on this path. You wanted to make sure that they knew what they were doing. That's clear. They know what they're doing. Now the key is the players, all of these players, all of these picks, are they the right evaluators of talent? Did they find the right people? Did they get good luck in that they stumbled onto some of these people because the draft was so deep, or in a trade, somebody like Jaden Hardy is part of the Anthony Davis trade, ends up being a knockdown shooter. I love the way he strokes it, by the way. I think he can really shoot it. His percentages were low in Dallas and not so much here. What will they develop those players well? That's the part we don't know. That we don't know any of that yet. This was Will Dawkins asked specifically about BYU's AJ DeBonsa.
AJ DeBonsa bring that might work in your organization?
Yeah, Massachusetts guy, just like myself. So you can imagine, since 14 years old, we've been here, and he's the next one out of our state. So I know AJ and his family pretty well, just based on just being in Massachusetts in basketball. But again, it's people. This guy has a charisma to him. He's got a confidence to him. He's been able to do it at every level that he stepped at, increase his play. And when you talk about basketball, he can score it. He can defend. He's long. He can make plays for others. He's a high-level talent, so we have an opportunity to take a look at him and get to know him a little bit more. We got to interview him today. We'll spend a little bit more time with him, hopefully, in D.C. But, again, a true talent at the top of this draft.
There you go. I don't know what that tells you guys. I mean, I would hope that if you're going to answer a question about a player at the top of the draft, rather than a one word, which is what he did with the Junkies yesterday, which was great. And I think he said for DeBonsa, consistent scorer or something like that. But if he were asked about Peterson, I would imagine, other than the fact that, they grew up in the same, area in Boston, or in the same, city, and part of that New England scene, that Boston scene. Other than that he'd say similar things about Peterson, would say similar things about Boozer, etc. Caleb Wilson. He's not going to, I think we've learned enough listening to Will Dawkins and some of the, even Michael Winger to a certain degree. We've heard much less from him over the last couple of years. They're not going to give away their hand. Now, Sean Farnham, who has called a lot of college basketball games at ESPN, I actually think he's really good as a college basketball analyst. He was on something yesterday. You'd have to tell me what it was, Max. But he thinks that the trade possibility is real. Here's what he said.
The church rarely loses. I know that.
What do you think the Utah Jazz do?
I think they're going to try to trade, Jimmer. They'd have to give up a good piece. They'd have to give up a piece that Washington would want. If they want AJ and they think AJ is going to be their guy and they want to keep him in state, from Utah Prep to BYU to the Utah Jazz, there's a price to be paid. And as Ted DiBiase, the $1 million man, said back in the day, everybody's got a price for the $1 million man. And for the Washington Wizards, they have a price. I was talking with Ace earlier today as I saw him in the lobby with AJ, and he's like, what's going to happen? And I said, well, the church rarely loses. I know that. We'll see what they want to give up. And is Washington willing to deal?
Yeah. Ryan Smith is the owner of the Utah Jazz. He's, by the way, not even, I think he's in his mid-40s, something like that, and is a Utah guy, a billionaire businessman, and I'm assuming Mormon. I'm assuming, Latter-day Saints guy. I think that's what Farnham was referring to. So, there's been some conversation that, last year when Utah selected Ace Bailey with the fifth pick overall, right before the Wizards selected Trey Johnson, there was some conversation that the Wizards were very much interested in Ace Bailey. I was not an Ace Bailey guy, just for whatever it's worth. I saw him play multiple times in the Big Ten that year with Rutgers. Dylan Harper, I liked a lot, and Harper's really playing well for San Antonio right now, and was picked number 2 overall. I mean, how about that last year? It's still kind of amazing. Rutgers ended up with 2 top 5 picks in the NBA draft. But the reason I didn't like Ace Bailey, just to refresh, is there was a night they played in College Park and he tapped out. Derek Queen was dominating him and he tapped out. He went over to the bench, sat, never came back into the game. And I was like, that's not a guy I'd want on my team. I saw it a couple of times. He did the same thing. He had a really good game against Indiana. And then the next night or 2 games later, he just sort of tapped out. Maybe it was some load management as a college player. I don't know. Ace Bailey played pretty well as a 19-year-old rookie this year. 6'9", 200 pounds, can do a lot. Super versatile, but he averaged 13.8 points per game, just over 4 rebounds a game. Played really good for a rookie season at 19 years old for a bad basketball team, of course. So could the Wizards trade back 1 spot for, Ace Bailey and maybe future picks? I don't know. I mean, the only thing I care about when it comes to what they do in the upcoming draft is that they either pick the player that they think has the best chance 5, 6, 7 years down the road of becoming an MVP or being an MVP contender. That's number 1. Number 2, if they don't see that in any of these players, then I would want them to consider a trade, to trade back and acquire more opportunities to get more really good players that they think are all-star potential, maybe not MVP potential. But the number 1 goal when you're picking that high in an NBA draft is, can I find the next MVP candidate, when he's 24, 25 years old, whoever that player is? Because that's what you need in the NBA to win championships. You have to have a top 5 player. Gone through this list over and over and over again. You go back, 2004 was the last team, the 04 Pistons, who beat the Lakers, were the last team without an obvious top 5 player. After that, San Antonio, Tim Duncan. After that, the Heat, Shaq and Wade. After that, the Spurs, Tim Duncan. The Celtics of 08 had, you could certainly say that Kevin Garnett that particular year was a top 5 player. In 09, it was Kobe with the Lakers in back-to-back years. In 11, it was Dirk with Dallas. In 12, it's LeBron. In 13, it's LeBron with the Heat. In 14, this has been, the pushback with some of you over the years when I've said this. that when the Spurs won the title in 14, Kawhi Leonard was the MVP of the finals. Was he a top 5 player in the league at that point? No, not, necessarily. Was Tim Duncan still a top 5 player? That's where it gets a little bit dicey. So the 14 Spurs would be the one pushback on this. And then you had, obviously, Golden State with Steph, Cleveland with LeBron, Golden State with Durant and Steph back-to-back, Toronto with Kawhi in 2019, the Lakers with LeBron in 2020, the Bucks with Giannis in 21, Golden State in 22. If you want to say Steph at that point wasn't top 5, he was close to it. The Joker in 23, and then last year, Tatum and Brown, really, but Tatum, more so as a first-team All-NBA selection in 24. Then last year, obviously, the MVP with SGA. So the 14 Spurs, maybe, but I think you got to go all the way back to the 04 Pistons to find the last NBA champion without an obvious top 5 player on the roster. Their best players were Rip Hamilton, Chauncey Billups, Ben Wallace, Rasheed Wallace, etc. Forgetting somebody else on that team, but wasn't a top 5 player. Tayshaun Prince. Up next, Eric Edholm from the NFL Network will turn the conversation to football. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. By the way, real quickly, I went back and checked that 2014 Spurs team. Duncan was not an all-star or an all-NBA selection. Kawhi was too young, even though he was the NBA Finals MVP. He was not an NBA all-star, but Tony Parker was a second-team all-NBA selection. But you could not argue, no way, that Tony Parker was a top 5 player in the league. So I'll add the 2014 Spurs to the 2004 Pistons. So twice in the last 21 seasons, you've had a team without an obvious top 5 player win the NBA title. It's very rare. You've got to end up with one of those truly elite top 5-ish kind of players to win it all. You can get to the finals like Luka did a few years ago, but you're not going to win it all without having one of those top 5 guys. All right, let's shift the conversation to the NFL. If you're just joining the show, Washington's international London game has been officially announced by the league. They will host the Colts in London on October 4th. I would imagine their bye week will come the week after. They have not had an early season bye week in a long time. Their byes have been much later in the season, but typically off of the Europe trip international game, you get your bye week. So look for, following the Colts, a week 5 bye week when the schedule comes out tomorrow night. Eric Edholm is joining us. He's one of my favorites to read and to have on the show. Does a great job for NFL.com and the NFL Network, at Eric_Edholm on X. I was saying something earlier about this schedule release. It's become such a massive deal. It's not like all of a sudden a massive deal. I mean, this is 15 years we've been seeing, the actual schedule release be televised by multiple networks. But it seems like in the last 3 years, by the time we get to the actual official release, much of it's been leaked out already. Like, I don't know how do they stop that?
That's a good question. Obviously there are some of us who get, if not the whole thing, parts of it ahead of time. Of course, they slow drip some of the, the international games and the primetime games and stuff as a way to kind of build up to this. But you're right. I mean, you see, everybody reporting out specific details. The Packers are playing this team in week 13. They've got this stretch in this part of the season. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, they do take pretty good measures to protect themselves from getting that info out. But you know how it is. I mean, these days, everything gets out so quickly anyway. But there's still some mysteries.
Yeah, there will be. I feel like the last couple of years, though, on the day that it's released, that's when people actually leak out the entirety of schedules. Right. And by the time we get to Thursday night, 8 p.m., it's already out there. It is really a testament to the NFL and the popularity of it, Eric, that a schedule in which you already know who your favorite team is going to play, the opponents, that there is so much anticipation and that it will rate through the roof tomorrow night on television.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, people make travel plans around these things. It's different than finding out, okay, the Celtics and Knicks are playing on Christmas. Okay, right, great, got that. But, if you have a game in March 23rd, nobody cares, right? With the NFL, obviously every game carries so much weight. And the order of those games matter too, right? We're going to look at the Raiders to find out, who are they playing early in the season? Is Kirk Cousins going to be the starter, or is it going to be Mendoza? What about the Chiefs, right? Mahomes coming back from the injury. Who do they have weeks 1 through 4, right? I just want to see, do they slowly ramp up, or are they throwing the Chiefs in these primetime games? And when does the bye week fall? I heard you talking about the Commanders. That's obviously a huge one too. International trips. Some teams opt not to have the bye week after that's been a newer development the last 2 years, but not universal. So, for me, I mean, I'll be writing off draft day, right? Yeah. Off schedule release day and just sort of like, what are the developments that we don't know? Where obviously, like you said, we know the opponents, but who has 3 straight road games? Who has a brutal December? Who has, all these little different, seasons within a season, if you will. And that's kind of the stuff that resonates, I think.
All right, let me ask you. Maybe you know the answer, but I'm not going to have you officially announce it because that would just get you in trouble. But as we look at that first game, Wednesday night, September 9th in Seattle with the defending champs, because we know that the Thursday night game is 49ers Rams in Australia. Now that we know Rams 49ers, Cowboys Giants, because they're the first Sunday night. The Chiefs are playing a Monday night game week 1. That means left with Seattle's home opponents in 2026 being the Chargers, Bears, Cardinals, and Patriots, which would be a rematch of the Super Bowl. What's your best guess as to the first game of the year in Seattle?
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about it a little bit, obviously. I mean, the Bears have kind of reemerged as a team that, they were kind of a lot of people sort of, I don't care for them, but I'm going to watch them because they're exciting. That's what they kind of became. The Chargers are obviously an interesting one with Harbaugh and Herbert, and have some attention there. I don't know if do you put the Chiefs week 1 like we were talking about earlier with Mahomes? I think they want to kind of save that matchup.
Well, the Chiefs are already penciled in for the Monday night game against Denver, so they're not a possibility. Yeah,
I knew they were on. The Patriots would be an interesting one, but man, coming off that Super Bowl, would that generate buzz? I mean, I guess with the Vrabel stuff, maybe that's still lingering come August, but
maybe they want to steer clear of that in advance of the first game.
That feels like a week 5 Monday nighter to me, where you just sort of get through the first part of the season and then you get the rematch. Let's see where these teams are at that point. But I don't know the answer. And I'd be a bad liar here, right, if I did. But I'm kind of curious to see what they open with.
Yeah, I think you just gave me the right reason for not having the Patriots in that spot. First of all, the last time we saw this game, it was just brutally one-sided. Secondly, the Vrabel stuff, they're not going to want the build-up to their kickoff game to include a lot of the off-season controversy involving the head coach of the Patriots. I think it's Bears or Chargers. I think it's going to be the Bears or the Chargers, one of those two. And I would guess Caleb Williams in that spot.
I agree.
That makes sense to me.
He's become a showpiece kind of quarterback, very controversial. Not everybody loves him, right? I think the Bears are still kind of a national brand in a lot of ways, so makes a lot of sense.
Give me the game that, because I saw you wrote last week or maybe earlier this week, you had sort of the top 10 games of 2026 in terms of matchups. Give me, your top 2 matchups that you can't wait to see, no matter where they are.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Rams Seahawks, wherever the first battle is, maybe. I mean, that would be a pretty darn exciting one. Look, I mean, even with the game in LA, Darnold throwing the 4 picks, the other 2 ones up in Seattle were phenomenal football games. And look, I mean, I did a story this week too, kind of ranking the roster strength of all 32 teams, or the top 10 anyway. But those are my numbers 1 and 2, Rams and Seahawks. I mean, I kind of heard your little spiel about the NBA and the top players. Maybe the Seahawks don't have a top 5 player on their roster, but they have so many top 100 players and so many top 150 players. And the Rams are so balanced as well and have a ton of firepower. And that one right there, I would say Bears-Packers after last year has to have a little extra zest given the way those games went down too. I mean, there are obviously a lot of great matchups, but those are the ones that kind of, drafting off last year, I think have so much bang for their buck. It's going to be fun.
You mentioned that first game when Darnold threw 4 picks. It was the game that the Rams actually won at SoFi. Eric, I'm wondering if you feel similarly to me. I've talked a lot about this since the end of the season. I can't remember the last time that I felt so strongly that the best team in the NFL didn't win the Super Bowl. I just think that the Rams still, and they didn't win the Super Bowl, and they lost those last 2 games because of special teams more than anything else, and it counts. Special teams count. But I just don't think and didn't think in the moment that Seattle was a better team than the Rams were last year.
Yeah, I mean, I had Seattle I think I was the first team to vault them number. I could be wrong, but I think I was.
No,
the first
I
one to
remember
put
you
them.
really liked them early in the season.
Yeah, it was about midway that I finally was like, okay, even after that loss, I think I dropped them to number 3 in the power rankings. And this is coming from a guy who had the Rams number 1 previously prior to that too. So it's not like and afterward for that matter. So it's really hard to split the difference. The Rams, like you said, I mean, they lost 5 games plus the playoff game. I think every single one of them was by 7 points or fewer. Now, included in that were the Philly meltdown, right? The block kicks that run back for, you go from a win to a loss in a heartbeat. The Seattle win in LA involved a missed kick at the buzzer. There were several other really close shaves in there. But the fact is they were in every single game. They could have won every single game they played last year. The special teams mistakes, especially early in the season, a couple late as well, obviously were huge problems. And if they don't improve that area of their team, all this roster ranking stuff can still get thrown out the window. So I'm kind of two minds here. Yes, I mean, they looked pretty darn potent last year. I don't think there was anybody on the AFC side that matched what either LA or Seattle did, but for me, it was harder to separate the two.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that's safe to say, when we got done with last year, is that there were 2 teams at the top and there was distance, significant difference between those 2 teams and whomever was the 3rd best team in the league. And I think for a while I thought it was Philly. I'll tell you who I thought it was at the end of the year. I thought it was Houston. And I still think what they did in Foxborough, dropping CJ Stroud back over and over again, was the dumbest thing of the postseason. If they had run it 3 times and punted another 5 or 6 times, they probably would have won the game with their defense.
And what did they do this offseason? They went out and got David Montgomery, and they went out and continued to replenish that offensive line. I think they realized they made the same mistake you did. On the one hand, like, if they're ever going to fulfill their promise and ever be a Super Bowl contender, which I think they can't, CJ Stroud has to play a lot closer to the level he did as a rookie than he has the last 2 years, which have been disappointing. Even if you just look at the raw numbers, there's not a massive difference. Interceptions a little higher, yards a little down, but nothing earth-shattering. But the level of play and the confidence that he showed in his rookie year compared to the last 2 years has been night and day. So I'm with you. I thought that was borderline coaching malpractice, and I'm a huge D'Amico Ryans fan. But
yeah, me too.
I just he's either got to turn the corner or they have to change their identity.
Talking to Eric Edholm from the NFL Network and NFL.com. We'll get to Washington in a moment. Right now, give me, and it's early, but give me the player, the coach, or just the organization that's under the most pressure entering 2026.
That's a good question. I mean, the Bills have to be up there. I don't know if they're number 1, but they've got to be on that list somewhere pretty high, I think. And, the way last season unfolded with a wide open AFC, like we were just talking about, right? All the top teams, we mentioned, 4 or 5 NFC teams. There really was a vacancy in the AFC. The Broncos couldn't fill it. The Patriots, somehow found a way through. The Texans couldn't, and the Bills couldn't. And, that was kind of their year with Mahomes out, with Burrow not in the playoffs, with Lamar Jackson out of the postseason. They're opening this new stadium right across from the old one. There's obviously a lot of frustration. They're bringing it, you were getting to kind of the point where, Josh Allen's been in the league almost a decade now.
Yeah.
It's just, he's in his 9th season now.
He played so great in that Jacksonville game and the Denver game.
Yeah. I mean, what was funny to me was I did not expect them to finish in the top 5 of my roster rankings because there are holes, but I heavily weight the quarterback position, and Allen helps kind of lift him up so much. So, if he's not special and the defense doesn't make some kind of improvement, especially against the run, I mean, I think that pressure is pretty high there. But then, there are other teams. The Rams, you could argue, Stafford, maybe his final season or one of them, and again, to your point, they looked like the best team in football for at least a portion of last year, if not most of it. So, they've got to be high on that list too.
I mean, I wrote down so many of these before having you on because I was going to ask you this question. Like last year, I thought it was Lamar Jackson. I think it's Lamar Jackson again. I think he's at the top of the heap because at least Josh Allen has played exceptionally well in the postseason. Lamar Jackson hasn't, and they weren't even in the postseason last year. Yeah. And then I thought, well, my God, in Philadelphia, there's a lot of pressure on Jalen Hurts this year. Sure those were the first two that came to mind for me. What do you make of both of those?
Well, for Jalen too, I mean, think about, the A.J. Brown situation is we assume going to come to an end here. He's going to end up in New England, and that was always something that felt like that relationship had run its course. It was holding both of them back. Okay, we got that figured out. But you have this offensive line issue that may not go away where, Lane Johnson and Landon Dickerson are, they were retirement candidates at one point. Jeff Stoutland, their O-line coach, the longtime guru, he's not with the organization. So there's some questions there all of a sudden. Is Saquon Barkley going to regain his form? Is the offensive design going to be one of the most tough to watch? I mean, it was not a pretty offense last year.
No.
Nothing about it felt artful or natural. So, yeah, I would say the whole Philly situation, but definitely Jalen in particular. And Lamar, you're right. I mean, look, I think Lamar's always going to sort of face questions until he answers some big ones. It was the same with Peyton Manning. It was the same with other guys. But, yeah, a new head coach maybe gives him a little bit of a buoy for a while, but at the same time, he's one of those guys that, you have to expect greatness out of, and you don't always get it.
The coaches I wrote down, and I think it's obvious that Todd Bowles has to get something done this year.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But here were two that I think at the end of next year, if the seasons don't go well, I'm interested in what you think about Dan Campbell's future if Detroit were to miss the playoffs for a second consecutive year. And how about Jim Harbaugh? Isn't this the year that he better, not only get to the postseason, but do some damage?
Those are interesting ones. I mean, there's always a candidate that had you mentioned their name prior to the season of them actually getting fired, you would have said, no way. Now that's a bridge too far, right? And you have to say that both these guys have had success and making playoffs. Obviously, the Lions got to an NFC Championship game a few years ago. I think it would take a pretty fall for the Lions to end up in that spot. I mean, now these things change quickly, but he's a pretty popular guy in Detroit. Could it wear thin? Could it, if they go 2 for 14 on fourth downs again this year or whatever, some ridiculously poor percentage, people go, okay, this thing has run its course, maybe. But Bowles is an obvious one, no doubt about it. Harbaugh, less obvious, but because he's a big name and because they have a franchise quarterback in the prime of his career, if they don't maximize that, take advantage of that, I could see some pressure there.
I think Kevin O'Connell, to a certain degree, is under the gun a little bit, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a heck of a head coach, but also,
so do I.
They kind of put themselves in this position a little bit with the quarterback spot, and yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be shocking. I don't know what's going to, end up with the front office situation there. Kind of interesting that they're going through a search right now, but yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting.
All right, let's talk Washington. To wrap this up. So you always do your power rankings, and the updated or the last power rankings I have from you are post-draft, right after the draft. And you've got Washington at 24 in your power rankings. Why so low?
Pretty low. Yeah, no, I mean, again, I it's hard not to sit there and look at where did we last see them, right? And I know the NFL is not a linear league. I know teams like Washington can go from 5 wins to winning the division and then back down again or whatever. So but it's hard not to say, like, the last time we saw him, the defense had some issues. The quarterback was under fire. Have they solved all those things? I mean, that's the biggest question, I think, right now. Did they add enough true difference makers? Certainly on defense, the number of bodies they added, you have to imagine it's going to result in some kind of improvement. But I happen to think the Giants are going to be more competitive this year. I think the Cowboys are going to be a tougher team to face. The Eagles theoretically should be as competitive or close to it as they were last year. So, tough competition again. And, I don't know that, I don't think we're entering kind of the CJ Stroud phase of his career, but last season, some doubt crept in a little bit more, than what we saw from his rookie year performance. And those things do happen. So you have to at least allow for the possibility that Jaden Daniels isn't going to regain that same level of proficiency that he had as a rookie. And it's a possibility. I hope he does. He was so exciting to watch, completely seemed to change the trajectory of that franchise. And as I remind everybody, it's May. I mean, you know what I mean? I'm willing to admit
it is May.
But ask Vikings fans, they were not happy with my ranking.
But you know what? It's interesting, and I've had you on the show so many times over the years, so I feel comfortable telling you this.
Yeah.
Last week or the week before, I did a call segment where I said, outside of this market, the national, media, NFL media, they don't have high expectations for Washington. And I cited all of these, all too early power rankings. And, your 24 for Washington was essentially the average of where they are in power rankings. And I contemplated why that was. And one of the reasons I gave is I said there's this, I believe, incorrect sort of narrative about Jaden Daniels' second season that somehow, like, he regressed. The truth is he didn't play football. And he played 4 complete football games, start to finish. He only played in 7 total. Like, when Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow or Lamar Jackson get hurt, because these are quarterbacks, Mahomes this past year, and I'll take Mahomes out of the equation. I should probably take Burrow and Lamar out of the equation. But when a high-level quarterback is lost for the significant majority of a season, your season is doomed. You got no shot. And it seems to me that the national media perceives Jaden Daniels' second season as a step-back season. And it wasn't. He actually played okay in the games that he played in. He only played in 4 complete football games, and he was injured 3 different times. And then they shut him down at the end of the season for the final 4 games. And so I said, I think that that's number one. And I think number 2, and you said it first, is the defense was legitimately the worst in the NFL at the end of last year. And it's hard to see how it would bounce up to like even the middle of the pack, even though they have completely changed personnel and coaching on that side. But how do you respond to the Jaden Daniels critique of you and a lot of people who I think have sort of relied on, he wasn't as good last year as he was his rookie year. But the reason for that, Eric, is he didn't play very much football.
Absolutely fair point. I mean, we saw that game against the Chargers, right? I mean, that was one of their best wins of the season. You thought, like, hey, maybe they're going to turn the corner here. Let's go. And, the first 3 quarters of the Bears game or whatever. I mean, there were obviously some promising stretches. There were also some disappointing ones, right? They didn't come firing out of the gates. He didn't have the same explosive play percentage as he did before. So I agree with you again. I mean, it's a smaller sample size. You're right. They were cautious with him. I think probably smartly so at the end of last year. But I thought there was also some hesitancy too. And I felt like there were times where either he didn't trust his playmakers, they didn't feel like they were open. Again, it's not always on him too. I think there's probably a schematic element to it. There's probably a personnel element to it. And then there's the Jaden equation as well. So, look, I don't want to make it seem like I'm projecting, this is going in the wrong direction. I just worry that after a kind of a lost season, how does it get back on track?
Yeah, and I think the second part of what you just said speaks to the other part of it, which is they literally were down wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, running back 1, D-end 1, D-end 2, corner 1. They were the most injured team in recent memory with their frontline starters. They just didn't have them for much of the season, and that just is a reality in the NFL. You know, I get accused of defending the team because I talk about the injuries. I'm like, the injuries are not an excuse. They are an NFL reality for anybody that's followed this league for more than 2 minutes. And they had their bad year. Hopefully it won't happen. It could happen again. But yeah. I think your Giants thing is interesting. Do you like Jackson Dart? Do you believe that they got it right with him?
I think there's some really interesting parts of his game. I still think you could see at the end of the year, even when he was such an effective runner, like they were still, not like you can't throw the ball. Of course you can, but they were still limiting that part of his game. There wasn't the Malik Neighbors on the field at the end of the year. There was Wan'Dale Robinson catching 12 passes for 68 yards every game, right?
Yeah.
So I think we're going to see a little different Giants offense, but it's not like they added a ton of deep threats and all of a sudden the offensive line's no question, no worries or anything. So I also thought they were going to maybe add more to the backfield. So I'm kind of curious to see what the offensive design looks like, but I do think you're going to see his running involved. And, maybe he's not Drake May level good, but I think he can do some things that are at least in that vein.
Always enjoy conversations with you, Eric. You do a great job. Appreciate it.
Thank
At
you.
Eric_Edholm on X. He writes a lot for NFL.com. Does a great job covering the league. Appreciate it. We'll do it again over the summer, hopefully.
Looking forward to it. Talk to you soon, Kevin. See you.
Eric Edholm, everybody. Up next, Chase Hughes will jump on with us, and we'll get Chase's thoughts on what the Wizards will do next month. Kevin Sheehan Show. The Team 980, the team980.com. We're free and live on the Odyssey app. Chase Hughes has been covering the Wizards for several years now. Works for Monumental Sports. He's out in Chicago for the NBA Draft Combine, where he's seen a lot of testing of some of these elite players: Peterson, DeBonsa, Boozer, etc. Caleb Wilson. By the way, DeBonsa registered the highest vertical leap at just over 42 inches. Chase is with us right now. So, great news. They got number 1 overall. The bad news is there's choice, and there's not an obvious number 1. Most people feel that way. Maybe you feel differently. You and I have talked about DeBonsa and Peterson going back to the early portion of the basketball season. But let me ask you, as we sit, today, and we ponder what might happen on June 23rd, the night of, or even beforehand, just give me sort of the percent chance that they take DeBonsa, Peterson, somebody else, or trade.
Well, I'll give you that in a second. First of all, I think it's actually good news there's no consensus number 1 pick. I've long had a theory that there can be a lot of groupthink with a consensus number 1. And if you look back at drafts of the past, the vast majority of the time, that guy doesn't end up being the number 1 pick. So I think sometimes you're sort of backed into a corner. You take the guy, you're crazy not to, but if you know the history of the draft, you know that guy's probably not going to be the best pick. So I think they have a little bit of more room for creative thinking, and I think that could work to their advantage. But right now, in terms of percentage, I'm not trying to cop out of this. I think it's 50-50 between DeBonsa and Peterson. I was more certain yesterday that DeBonsa, looking at mock drafts, maybe it was 60-40, but I keep hearing that they like both of these guys. And I think, they wanted the power of choice. They know that this is a really good draft. And I think it's as simple as you're splitting hairs between 2, possibly 3 guys that are worthy of a number 1 pick in the average year. And so they really feel like they need to take their time, do their due diligence. My guess is that a consensus won't form until a couple weeks before the draft, kind of like it did with Anthony Edwards 6 years ago.
If they remain, 50-50 on those 2 players, and Utah isn't 50-50, they're 100-0 on DeBonsa, do you think they would consider a trade back?
Oh, 100% they would consider it. I think that falls into just the due diligence. You'd be crazy not to pick up the phone. It kind of reminds me, as you know, I used to cover the Nationals, and I remember Mike Rizzo, people would ask him, would you listen to trade offers for like Bryce Harper or whatever? And he would always say, I'm never not going to pick up the phone. I'll always listen. And the first time I heard it, I was kind of surprised, but he would say it every year. And then it just kind of started to, click for me. Of course, you got to pick up the phone. You never know what a team's going to offer. Look at the Lakers and how they got Luka. So
have you contemplated what that trade would look like? I'm just curious.
I've taken a look at the Jazz roster, of course. The Wizards, whenever they make trades the last few years, they've favored future draft capital. The Jazz have a ton of that, right? They triggered a rebuild by trading Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, so they got a bunch of draft picks. But what's an interesting wild card in all of this is so much was made about the proposed draft lottery rules that could be voted in later this month. And I think what's done a little underrated is the potential ramifications and domino effects in terms of the trade value. Like first round picks are going to have a different set of value if those rules go through. Veteran players who can help teams compete for the play-in, maybe teams otherwise would have stripped their roster down. Like a lot of stuff's going to change. So I think it's a little difficult at this moment to predict trade value and try to predict trades.
All right, back to them staying at 1 and picking. So what is the buzz out there? You've said you think they're probably 50-50, DeBonsa, Peterson. What's the buzz overall about DeBonsa, Peterson, Boozer, Caleb Wilson, etc.? Is there a chance? I mean, like you said, things will change between now and the 23rd, but what are you sort of sensing is the lean for most people out there?
I would say the lean for most people is DeBonsa, but, ultimately it's the Wizards' call. And, they, I think, have a pretty strong track record in the draft, especially when you look at like Will Riley and Keyshawn George, some of these cases where they've been able to see something other teams didn't. So it ultimately does come down to them. But I would say the buzz coming out of yesterday, you mentioned it, the DeBonsa vertical leap is unbelievable. 42 inches at basically 6'9" without shoes. Like, I think if you were to rank the best athletes to come into the draft this century, DeBonsa wouldn't be too far behind LeBron and Wemby. Like, how many guys have those types of measurables and explosiveness?
What about Banchero?
Like, you're probably.
What about Edwards?
I think this is well beyond Banchero. Edwards, sure, but Edwards wasn't 6'9" without shoes. Like, I think you're probably talking Dwight Howard. I think Derrick Rose would be one of the most explosive athletes, obviously, but DeBonsa's in that category. So that was crazy. I think Boozer beating all these guys in some of the quickness drills was surprising. Wilson, measured out really well, of course. He's taller than I expected. Peterson's taller than I expected. People were comparing him, former players were comparing him to Bradley Beal, but then he measured in at 6'4.5" without shoes. So he's going to be about 6'6" on the court. Like that's a different type of player than Bradley Beal, who was about 6'3". So it just, I think, further convinced everyone that this is a special class because all these guys had pretty strong selling points coming out of measurement day.
I'm reading something that you just tweeted, I guess, yesterday, and I totally agree with it. DeBonsa's three-point shooting percentage wasn't great, but the stroke is solid, and you saw some of that right yesterday at the Combine.
Yeah. I was tweeting some additional context because I had a video people were attaching to the misses that he made, even though he made more than he missed in the video. But yeah, I'm a believer in his shooting ability. He was extremely efficient overall. And I don't have it in front of me. I think he shot like 32, 33% from three. It's not like it was like 20%. And then I remember looking at his game logs, and there was a chunk of 17 games in the middle of the season. He played 35 games. So this is half of the year, where he shot about 39% from three on 5 attempts a game. So he started slow. I thought he looked a little tired at the end of the season in the tournament, even though he scored a bunch of points against Texas. So you never know what fatigue can do to shooting numbers. It's still ultimately a small sample size, but for half of his season to shoot about 39% from three on 5 attempts, that was convincing to me. And as you mentioned, just the shooting touch all over the floor. Like, he hit shots from all over. It's just, he wasn't shooting 40% from three, but there's no reason to believe that he can't develop a 3-point shot.
At Chase DC Sports on X. So what are you hearing in terms of the kind of due diligence, the depth of the due diligence on Darren Peterson that will be required between now and the 23rd?
Well, it goes way back to when these guys are like 14 years old, if you ask Will Dawkins. So they've done a lot of their due diligence, but sitting down and interviewing these guys at the Combine, bringing them in for a visit, we'll see what a workout looks like. It always depends with the top players, Usually it's an individual thing. They don't want to go against each other. But, this is an important runway because the Wizards now know they have an opportunity to get these guys. And the way Will Dawkins likes to say is that they draft people, not players. So they got to make sure that the intangibles are what they're looking for. And I think it's probably more important this year than maybe your average year because, as we've said, you're splitting hairs between two really, really good prospects, potentially three. And I think fit into culture and intangibles and play style might be more important this year than it is in the years past. I don't think position is really going to matter. I think they're going to take the best player no matter what position they are, but certainly they want someone who, has the same priorities that they do. And I don't think that's going to be easy to decipher because my read on all three of these top guys, if you're including Boozer, Wilson as well, is that they're all very serious about basketball, especially for their age, and they love the game and they work hard. And I don't see major red flags with any of them.
So how would you there was a lot of celebrating and a lot of, justifiable excitement that the Wizards finally got some lottery luck and ended up with number 1 overall. But there was a lot of, at least with my listeners, this feeling like it was the culmination of something. And I'm like, no, this is just the beginning. This is the beginning of now trying to take all of these accumulated assets, players, picks, et cetera, and that part won't stop. And they need to start winning. How would you describe where we are in the midst of this rebuild that started 3 years ago?
I think they were ready to elevate already, and this just gives them some rocket fuel to shoot forward. You're right. It's, the famous Kobe Bryant quote, "Job's not finished." I think Michael Winger and Will Dawkins would tell you that, no, this isn't what they started the rebuild for. Obviously, you wanted high draft picks, but they started the rebuild so that when they come out on the other end, they're winning 50-plus games and they have a window for deep playoff runs, multiple years on top of multiple years. So this could very much help them get there. It's going to potentially fast track some things, but they still know that, they got bigger goals in mind. But certainly it's a huge, huge boost. I mean, I think the difference between picking first this year and fifth, which was their worst case scenario, probably less so than the average year, because I think even at 5, you're going to get a potential future star, but the timeline is pretty important. I think that the guys that you're picking at number 1 overall are going to make an instant impact and also present the long-term upside, when if you were picking 5th, you'd bring in a guy who probably, you'd have to set the expectations pretty low in year 1, maybe even year 2. So this certainly gets the Wizards in a really good spot moving forward.
Yeah, you just sort of described, because I think in trying to define what the end needs to be to sort of justify the entire process, I think what you just described is what I believe to be true as well. Like, saying a championship is unrealistic because it's so hard to win one in the NBA. But 50 plus, 45 to 50 plus win seasons consistently over a several year period with, top 3, top 4 Eastern Conference finishes, with, the opportunity in a year or 2 or 3 of those to go deep, and potentially, be in an Eastern Conference Finals or actually a championship series. That, to me, sort of is the definition of an end that would justify this entire previous 3 years. Is that where you would go with it, or would you go further?
No, I think that's correct. I mean, obviously their goal is to win a championship, but I think you often find, talking to executives, that the best thing you can do is just try to raise the floor of a team to a degree where you're in the playoffs year after year, and then you just hope that at least one of those years you break through and win it all, and it's your year. You're healthy, the stars align. But you mentioned conference finals and 50 wins. We all know they haven't done that since the 70s. So I think that's a fair goal to have in mind, and I think that's why they really wanted to take the long view, and they continue to take the long view. They got the first overall pick, but Winger and Dawkins have said this many times. They said in their opening press conference, they draft guys understanding that it's going to take like 8 to 10 years for them to reach their peak. And they're going to have to learn how to play in the NBA and then learn how to win. And that's usually a multi-year process. So I don't expect whoever they select first overall to change everything overnight. On the court, off the court, might be a different story, because I think we've already seen there's a pretty massive jolt of energy that has been given to this franchise.
Is Anthony Davis going to play for this team next year?
My expectation is yes. I mean, Will Dawkins has said that on the record multiple times. Anthony Davis, obviously, he's kind of towed a line in his own comments, but he's also said a lot of nice things about the organization and the talent that they have. And that was before they got the number 1 pick. And then, I think he's reacted, it seems, it's kind of cryptic what he's posted on social media, but it seems like he likes the news that they got the number 1 pick. So, we'll have to see. But obviously, the game's been changed a little bit in terms of their roster and their outlook with this news. So if they end up having a conversation with Anthony Davis, he's mentioned he wants to have that. I don't know if it's happened yet, but certainly if the Wizards have another feather in their cap now.
Let's assume that he is on the roster. He's healthy. He plays a lot of the season, 60 plus games. Give me your top 7, your 5 starters, including whomever they pick at number 1, first couple of guys off the bench, and what their best case in 2026, 2027 is in terms of number of wins.
Right now, my guess is that if it's Peterson or DeBonsa at 1, they are in the starting lineup. Boozer or Wilson, those guys play the 4. If you're telling me Anthony Davis is playing 60-plus games, they're probably backing him and Alex Sarr up, right, realistically.
Right.
So your starting lineup's probably Trae Young, either Keyshawn George or Darren Peterson at the 2, and then either Keyshawn George or DeBonsa at the 3, depending on who's the pick. And then Davis and Sarr is your 4 and 5. I think coming off the bench, I definitely think Will Riley profiles well as like a microwave scorer. We saw what he did down the stretch.
Yep.
Bub Carrington, with the way he shot last year, maybe running the second unit. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think Bilal Coulibaly still has a role, regardless of who they select, even if there's overlap with, the position, because of his defense and because this team wasn't great defensively last year and can't really afford to, just set aside a guy who can defend on the wing as well as he can. And then after that, obviously they're going to have a backup big man, ideally, who can rebound. Perhaps that's Tristan Vukcevic. Perhaps that's an area they target in free agency. And I don't want to leave out Justin Champagnie. He is under contract. I really like the way he plays, the way he rebounds. This team was dreadful at rebounding last year, has been for several years, and he's a good isolation defender too. So I think he would find his way into the rotation, but that's a pretty young roster. So I think we'll have to see what they do in the draft. Free agencies after that, I think they'll kind of take a breath after the draft and say, well, what areas do we need to augment from here? And certainly veteran help could be of use if you're trying to make the playoffs. So that's where I think it would stand right now. I hope I didn't leave anyone out. I mean,
Trey Johnson.
Trey Johnson. I left him out. Okay, so Trey Johnson. Yeah. Speaking of microwave scorers off the bench, if he's not starting, it's a 2. But I like the idea of him coming off the bench and just lighting it up from 3.
And would they still be playing a year from now in the second round?
Oh, in the second round, I think that's probably pretty lofty. I think that would be a really unexpectedly exciting season. I think the plan sounds good. I mean, I think what's a little bit underrated is how the bottom of the Eastern Conference got a lot better this year.
Yeah.
I'm not looking at the standings in the moment, but I believe the Hornets won 43 games and were the 9 seed, right? And didn't even make the playoffs. That's a pretty high bar if you won 17 games last year. And going back to the lottery rules, if they go through, it might be a more competitive league. It might be a more competitive Eastern Conference. So I think, if you're in the 30s, that's great. And I think that could probably get you in the play-in tournament. But if it doesn't and the lottery rules go through, you might be in a pretty good spot come next year for the lottery.
As always, thanks for doing this. Really appreciate your thoughts and insight. Enjoy the rest of Chicago, and I'll talk to you probably before the draft.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kevin.
Chase Hughes, everybody at Chase DC Sports. All right. We've got some football to talk about. We'll start to get to that when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. So Stefan Diggs was in town over the weekend where he held a Mother's Day event. And our own Wes Clark, Wes does a lot of our social media work, does it for both stations, 106.7 The Fan and 980. Wes was in here producing on Monday before Max got back from vacation yesterday. Wes went out and actually asked Stefan Diggs about playing here for Washington. Here's what Diggs said.
As a DMV guy, you're coming into free agency. Have you talked to some of the Commander players?
Yeah, a little bit. I'm familiar with the city and I'm familiar with the people. So we're gonna see down the pipe over these next couple months what looks good, what makes sense. I definitely want to shed some light on them and might go check them out for a little bit. Just it's love, it's hometown, so it makes sense. But right now, I kind of like take a breath. I've been training, I've been doing everything I'm supposed to, but I'm more targeting on the charitable stuff right now, and then everything else will fall into place.
There you go. That's what he said. I definitely want to shed some light on them, check them out for a little bit. It's love, it's hometown, so it makes sense, but certainly not a commitment to or even expressing any sort of desire to play for Washington. But that didn't stop Pierre Garçon from weighing in on social media. The longtime wide receiver here in D.C., prior to that in Indianapolis, and then with the 49ers, said there was a tweet that went out, Stefan Diggs' preferred place to play in 2026 is with the Commanders. That was from some site called NFL Rumors. That's a trolling tweet because he didn't say that, obviously. But Pierre Garçon tweeted out, this would be really good for both sides. Lots of, hands in the air praying for it to be true. And then he wrote, I believe it will happen. That was from Pierre Garçon. I actually don't believe it'll happen. I would love for it to happen if Diggs is healthy and ready and hungry. And, the Brandon Ayuk situation is going to be a long slog because that's what it's shaping up to be right now. Even if Brandon Ayuk is likely to Washington once he gets released, will the team want to wait it out, which could last until the end of August? Or would you rather get Stefan Diggs signed and in before training camp begins? And then, by the way, and many of you suggested this when we talked about it last week, what about both of them? Sure. Why not? None of these is going to be super expensive. The Ayuk deal is going to be all sort of prove it in terms of the format of the deal. It's going to be a one-year deal. It's going to be low on base, and it's going to be very high on incentives. Stefan Diggs has played more recently, went for over 1,000 yards last year, 85 receptions, led the Patriots in both receptions and yards. He's probably going to get a lot of activity that would be beyond a prove-it deal. I'm sure there will be some, comfort in the deal that he signs in terms of potentially more than 1 year and some real guaranteed money. But it's not going to be top of the market wide receiver money for Stefan Diggs, and probably not even middle of the market wide receiver money at this point. But I'll tell you what, the more, and I've said this before, and Diggs for one season in this offense with Jaden Daniels, having a receiver like Terry on the field with him, he's never had that. The closest thing would be Adam Thielen, when he was in Minnesota. And he was the number one and Thielen was the number two. Here, you could make the case Terry's the one, Diggs is the two. He's never been in that position, not in Minnesota, not in Buffalo, not in Houston for the 8 games, although Nico Collins was on the roster, and then not last year in New England. It could be a really beneficial situation for Diggs and the offense. Diggs can still do it. And there's no doubt about what he is on game day, man. He is a big-time dog, man. This guy is truly competitive and does whatever it takes to win. Yes, when he's not being fed the football, there is potential that it could go sideways. but not to the degree that I think sometimes the reputation says. Maybe he is short dose, small dose, but 1 year here with maybe, a second year where you could move on without much pain, I'm all on board for Stephon Diggs. And then if, Ayuk becomes available via waivers, you could do that too. They have a chance next year to be a good football team. It starts with the quarterback being healthy. It then goes to the defense, has to be improved. And then it goes to, what else do they have in terms of true, A players, A- players, B+ players? Add one or two more offensively. I'm with Pierre. I think it would be good for both sides. I don't think it'll happen, though. And here's why I don't think it'll happen. I think the Ayuk thing is real. I think the team is willing to wait for Ayuk. And I think if Stephon Diggs knows that, he sizes up this opportunity where you would have Terry and Ayuk, and he probably wants to be a number one or, worst case, a 1A somewhere, and wouldn't choose here. He's going to have some choices. Stephon Diggs is too good at 32 years old, played too well last year not to have some choices. Now that, everything related to the felony charge, the misdemeanor charge, that's all behind him now. Found not guilty on both. The felony strangulation and assault and the misdemeanor assault and battery. I definitely would consider Stephon Diggs. I think the idea of Diggs and Ayuk and Terry and Chig, Okonkwo all out on the field next year with a healthy Jaden Daniels, I think that would scare a lot of teams. I think offensively they could be really good. Yeah, there's going to be a little bit of an adjustment to the new scheme, to the, Ben Johnson, Kevin O'Connell, Shanahan, whatever Blau rolls out. There was an adjustment for, Caleb Williams last year. I actually think Jaden's more capable of adjusting even faster. I think this fit will be a good one. I think more play action pass attempts into the offense will be a great thing for a quarterback like Jaden Daniels. But, man, it'd be nice to add more explosive playmaking ability on the field with him. I'd totally be in to Diggs. I kind of feel like, Max, we've done a lot of Diggs and Ayuk conversation even together, but I'm not sure phone line-wise we've offered up this. You can only pick one, Diggs or Ayuk. Which of the two would you select? They come with different timelines, more likely than not. Diggs is here and ready for camp. Ayuk perhaps is not and doesn't get added until midway through camp or maybe shortly before the regular season begins.
Well, and there's one thing about the Stephon Diggs, like if we were to bring him in before Ayuk became available, don't you think that would take a lot of the 49ers leverage away from us, since we wouldn't be as desperate to sign somebody like Ayuk as a wide receiver too?
Well, I don't think I think the 49ers right now are in that mode of, I'm not doing him or any of my competitors any favors by turning him loose well in advance of when I have to. They don't have to release him because they don't have to pay him until September 1st any money. So why not wait it out, whether it's Washington or somebody else? Somebody could get desperate during training camp with injuries to wide receivers and say, fine, we'll give you a 7th-round pick. The problem with trading for Ayuk, as I've pointed out now for months, is that if you trade for him, you get his contract as well. And nobody wants to pay him $27.5 million next year and be on the hook for another $28 million in 2027. Not with his recent, shenanigans over the last year and a half. So I personally don't think that anybody would get so desperate as to trade for Brandon Ayuk. But the 49ers don't have to cut him yet. And so whether Washington signs Diggs or not, I don't think that changes the 49ers mindset. I think the 49ers mindset is you really, screwed us. You really kind of did something that's borderline unprecedented, so much so we were able to void $30 to $40 million in guaranteed, contract money. And we don't feel like we should do you any favors. More importantly, we don't feel like we should give a competitor, especially if the team's in the NFC, a chance to have you for a complete training camp so that you can adjust to your new squad. We'll turn you loose and you can, on August 31st, and you can take 6-7 weeks to get adjusted to your new team or however long it would take. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. You have to choose one or the other, Diggs or Ayuk. This isn't a neither, and this isn't a both. You get one or the other. Which would you take? Again, the difference is timelines. The difference is age. The difference is upside. The difference is fit. There's a lot of differences between the two, but you only get one. Who would you pick? 301-230-0980. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. friend of mine just texted me. He said, I can predict what the results will be. About 60% will say Diggs and about 40% will say Ayuk. And then he linked me to a tweet, a poll that we put out, a Waldorf Honda poll question from 1 week ago, May 6th. Here's what Max and I figured out. Max wasn't here. That was his first day of vacation.
That's what happens when your producer goes on vacation.
Yeah. So he had forgotten that I should have remembered. I did say to you, I think we've done something similar to this recently. But I also said to you, it wouldn't shock me if a week later the results are different. Why not?
Let's run it back.
We're running it back. Game 2 of Ayuk or Diggs, 301-230-0980. Put it up as the Team 980
Let's do it.
Waldorf Honda poll question again, and let's see if we get different results. Be pretty funny. My answer a week ago hasn't changed. If you told me you have to pick one or the other, and both is not an option, neither is not an option, I would say Ayuk. I would assume that if they signed Ayuk, they cleared him of all the craziness and all of the physical issues. And you got a chance at 28 years old to get an elite receiver on your team. Diggs is attractive, very attractive to me as well, because I know he can really do it, and I know that you are going to get his absolute competitive best week in and week out. He's going to help you, and he's going to be here, and he's going to be available for the summer, and Ayuk may not be. But Ayuk, to me, has much greater long-term possibilities at his age. My answer would be Ayuk. That was my answer when we did it the first time as well. Answer, Max, since you have not weighed in on this.
Well, since I haven't weighed in on this, it's an interesting question because Stephon Diggs, when you look at everything on paper, going back to last year, he was wide receiver 1 on a team in the Super Bowl. Brandon Ayuk did not play football at all. So it's kind of hard for me to get an accurate kind of extrapolation of what Ayuk's career can continue to be if everything through all this is forgotten and gone forward like nothing happened and he just continues to play football. That's the best case scenario for that. For Stephon Diggs, man, he's a vet. He's been around. He's a DMV native. He's all of these things. I kind of lean Diggs here as opposed to the potential headache or disaster that could be Ayuk. And plus, if you bring in Stephon, you could get Trayvon on the other side of the ball. So you might get a little 2 for 1 there. So yeah, you know what? Give me Stephon over Ayuk. That's where I'm leaning right now.
All right. 1 Stephon Diggs, 1 Ayuk from the show. Let's go to Reggie. Reggie, you can only choose one for 2026. Stephon Diggs or Brandon Ayuk?
If you're looking, first of all, I love the show. If you're looking at this strictly from a football perspective, you got to go Diggs. But I'm not looking at it football. Like, I know what Diggs did 85 catches last year, I think 5 or 6 touchdowns. But I'm going to go Ayuk simply because this time next year, if the Ayuk experiment doesn't work, or let's say we go Diggs, this time next year we're going to be asking the same question. Then on top of that, we're going to be asking about Terry. So we're going to be even in more of a question at a wide receiver, perspective this time next year. So at least I'm going to roll the dice with Ayuk simply because if I can get 90% of what he was and then maybe can trend towards, that 100%, I feel a lot more, I feel better. But if fans were, just take off the glasses and strictly football, then it's Diggs without question because we just saw him in the, Super Bowl and we saw him catch 85 catches last year, and we haven't seen Ayuk since 24. But I got to look at this, year 2, 3, 4, and 5, and you will have a better shot with Ayuk than you will.
Yeah, 100%. So, that's why I'm on Ayuk. Not to mention that Ayuk's best in 2023. And I know that there's, a chance that he's not going to achieve that again, but it was much better than Diggs in 2025. Ayuk was a true elite wide receiver in the league in 2023. So I'd be looking to get that, not only for this year, but beyond this year. And you bring up a good point. We've mentioned it before, but we hadn't today. And that is the possibility that Terry could be playing his final year. You're going to need a number one receiver. Ayuk is a number one receiver if you get the Ayuk that we last saw. That's a big question mark, though. There's no guarantee of that. Let's go to Bobby in North Carolina. Bobby, go ahead. You can only choose one for this roster, Ayuk or Diggs.
Hey, Kev, I'm going to be uncoachable just for about 1 minute, okay? And
okay.
Work with me here. All right, so I gave you my answer last week, by the phone when you asked this question. So it would be malpractice to me for AP not to seriously kick the tires on both of these guys. If we've got that window to win, Kevin, it's not about money. Diggs wants to come home. I've heard enough over the last 10 days since he's got out of his legal trouble. Sign him. I think Brandon is a given once the 49ers release him. But, Kevin, you got to improve the roster. You bring both of these cats in, okay? And then you put those two with Terry and Chig and then our running back with our offensive line.
Okay, but you can only pick one. So you went uncoachable. I appreciate that. But you can only go one.
Brandon Ayuk because of his age, okay? And I think if he comes back, he's going to be hungry to prove himself. If he's healthy, what I think he is, he's had long enough rehab now. I don't care if he didn't play last year. Big deal. He's 28 years old. He's a freaking gamer. You bring him in. But, Kevin, I'm serious. You need both of these guys. You put those guys in that wide receiver room, and it's going to be pretty freaking lethal.
I just think that if you're going to get Ayuk, I just think Diggs ends up choosing somewhere else. I just don't know that that's realistic. I think if Diggs gets wind that they're waiting on Ayuk, but they want both, Diggs will pick a place where he's a 1 or a 1A somewhere else, Kevin, not, potentially, a slot, a third down slot receiver. Because remember, there's going to be a lot of 12 and 13 personnel with David Blau's system. I believe that, which will mean, less 3 wide receivers and more on the field. Thanks, Bobby.
He's got to know who, Kevin.
Yeah, go ahead.
He's got to know that Brandon is almost a given, okay? For him to be even talking about us right now the way he has been
I think he was just being polite. He was doing something Kevin Durant never did. He was like, of course I'm going to consider it. It's my hometown, etc. I think he actually gave a really good answer. We played that answer to our guy, Wes Clark. I don't think that was a preference. I don't think he was stating any sort of preference like, yes, I'm really into playing, in my hometown. I think it was hometown love. Sure, I'd consider it. Sure, I want to shed some light on them and check them out for a bit. It's love. It's hometown. Something Kevin Durant never did. Durant wouldn't even give Ernie Grunfeld and company a meeting. Thanks, Bobby. Let's go to Hollywood in Lexington Park. Ayuk or Diggs, Hollywood?
Kevin, you got to go with Ayuk. He's younger. And the thing with Diggs is, and you kind of touched on it a minute ago, Diggs, I think, has the mindset of, sure, coming home would be great, but I'm going to take the best opportunity. Brandon Ayuk wants to be here. He's made that clear. He wants to be here, and he's younger. And I think you also said earlier, Ayuk at his best, which, granted it was a while ago when we saw it, but Ayuk at his best surpasses what we saw from Diggs last year. So I think you got to go with Ayuk. There's more potential there. There's more upside, longevity. You got to go Ayuk.
Thank you, Hollywood, for that. It's funny because we did this a week ago. We had forgotten that we had done it a week ago. Max wasn't here. So Max hasn't done it, but it was 60-40 social media-wise, Ayuk, Diggs over Ayuk. And the calls, I think, even skewed heavier Diggs over Ayuk. But so far, the calls are skewing much heavier Ayuk over Diggs. But Ian will probably change that. Go ahead, Ian. You can only choose one. You have to choose one. Go ahead.
Right. So my first option would be neither, but to be coachable, I would go with Diggs simply for this reason. I think Ayuk is unprofessional, borderline crazy, stupid, all the above. And I also negate a little bit of his 2023 season, his one second-team All-Pro season, because he's in the Kyle Shanahan offense and he's surrounded by multiple first-ballot Hall of Famers in McCaffrey, Kittle, Trent Williams, Juszczyk, plus Kyle Shanahan. So it's hard for me to say Ayuk was the difference maker on that team when you have that amount of talent and that elite level.
Oh, they
of
had more than
offensive
just
coaching.
one difference maker. There's no doubt. You're not wrong about that. And you're not wrong about benefiting from all of those great players and that great coach. But they also had Brock Purdy as the starting quarterback. And I'm not saying that Brock Purdy didn't play well that year and hasn't played well at times here, through this first portion of his career. But I think Jaden's at a much higher level than Brock Purdy, so there would be that difference from 23 as well.
And I've said this many times. I don't like the direction that we are going as a franchise, where it's like, let's bring Jaden's friends from Arizona State. Can we bring his friends from LSU, like the better program that actually did something and won the Heisman? Why are we going back to Arizona State to bring Rachaad White and Brandon Ayuk? This is just weird. Like,
well, your assumption, first of all, they haven't added Ayuk, but I think there's interest in it. But to assume that they added Rachaad White because Jaden played with him at Arizona State is a reach. I don't think Jaden is a part of the personnel department decision making. I don't. I think that when it comes to Ayuk and White, would they go to him to say, "Hey, what was it like to play with these guys? What did you think about them personally?" Sure. By the way, that happens all the time. I mean, guys like Deron Payne and John Allen got asked about Alabama players all the time after they joined Washington from the front office, because there were so many that were draft eligible. So I don't think they're adding Brandon Ayuk to please Jaden Daniels. I don't think that that's Adam Peters or Dan Quinn's style. I know you disagree with me. I'd have to see a lot more proof that they're kowtowing to their young quarterback.
Well, I will tell you, it's concerning when you've seen the actions of Ayuk and Jaden Daniels together, like the whole film thing.
Well, that wasn't Jaden Daniels. That was a Brandon Ayuk action.
Sure, but he's linked to him for a reason. And
well,
Kevin,
he was linked to him in that particular instance, Ian, because during his very first training camp, he was, he's a gym rat. He's looking for every single person that can help. And he shared some of the tape, and Ayuk was an idiot and put it out on social media. The only thing you've said in this conversation so far that I tend to agree with is there's a possibility that Brandon Ayuk's judgment at the very least is so poor that you'd wonder about adding somebody with that decision-making, ability to your locker room and to your team. But it could be that this was just one of those terrible relationships that went badly, and the next one's going to be much better, because he was never a problem before 2024's injury. I mean, other than contentious contract negotiation.
Right. And I was just going to say, like, he wasn't relevant enough as a player prior to his contract situation to be contentious.
Well, he was relevant enough to be the number 2 PFF wide receiver in 2023. He led the league in yards per reception in 2023. He had 15 touchdowns over 2 years. He was a very good player in 22 and in 23, and very much an ascending player. Now, you can come up with reasons for it, and the reasons you came up for it aren't crazy. I mean, Trent Williams, Kittle, McCaffrey, Kyle, the players they had on defense, et cetera, all of that benefited anybody that was added to that system. But he was a pretty good player for sure, and I think an ascending player. And I should say player and talent, because he was a true vertical stretch-the-field threat and a very polished route runner, despite the offense that he was in, which was certainly beneficial to him. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. You can only pick one, Ayuk or Diggs, Aveen, go ahead.
Hey, Kevin, I'm going to go with Ayuk if we can get him at the start of camp. And if it's going to be till September when we get him, then I'd just rather go Diggs. I think he needs to be here for the start of training camp. Training camp is meant to get back into football shape. It's meant to work on your team technique. So once the season starts, it becomes way more just about, game plan installation. So I feel like the odds of him working out for this year go down if we're not going to have him until September. And Kevin, I just have a couple questions for you about this IU thing. Quick questions. I've heard you and other people say, it doesn't cost the 49ers anything to keep him, till the end of August. And I just asked, he is taking up a roster spot.
Yeah.
And we know how contentious these
actually because he's
get.
on that because he's on that left reserved list. I don't think he is.
Okay.
I could be wrong about that,
sure
but they put him on that list, which is a rare list to put a player. It's essentially a player went AWOL. Now, if he shows up to some of the offseason activities, can they keep him on that list? I don't know, but I don't think he's actually taking up a roster spot right now. I may be wrong about that, but go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, and I was just going to say that if Ayuk really wants to expedite this process and he wants to be here, why doesn't he just show up to San Francisco, their activities, their offseason activities, and talk to the media? And I feel like that would expedite it. And then the last question I have for you, Kevin, is about the contract. And I'm thinking that it's not that costly just to trade for him and do a late round pick swap, because there's no guaranteed money left on his contract. So
his base salary, for the next 2 years, which he'd be under contract for, are $27 and $28 million in base. Yeah, there's no out of pocket. He's got to play for you, but you're certainly going to play him in 2026 if you trade for him. And there's $27 million of base salary there. You don't want that. You want a base salary of 8, 9 to max 10 million, and then everything else is incentive based. I mean, here's the contract this in 2026. His base salary, in terms of where's the number? $27.274 million. So
I've seen his base salary for this season is and it's since all the guarantee was cut out, it's low. It's $1.3 million, and then the rest of the money on that deal is in-game bonuses. So if he were to play this season on that contract, it would total, and he played every game, it would total $14, $15 million. And then
I've got Spot Track up right now. And by the way, this has changed, interestingly, because this is different than what I looked at, recently. So, I mean, let me just mention that, yes, this has gotten confusing. Our guy, Mike Giannetti, obviously changed a lot of it around. So I'd have to really dig into it, but it does say base in 26, 1.215, but signing proration of another 2.7. The option that they'd have to pick up, basically the cap number would be 13.6. I got to look into this. You might be right. He changed this. This was not what it read recently. And if you've read every NFL, reporter out there, they say that the cost of acquisition is the cost of a contract that would lock you into 27 plus million in 26 and a 27 and 28 contract base salaries of 27 to 29 million per year. Obviously, you'd have to make the team for those two.
Yeah, I was looking into this last week too. That's why I wanted to ask you, because nobody has a clear answer on it.
This changed.
Yeah, but
I don't know why it changed. This is one site. We got to look into it. Yeah. So what else? So you take Ayuk though.
Yeah, and it was just about the contract. If you could trade for him, if it was that low, and then you can get out of it after this season or rework his contract, because he wants to rework to get more guaranteed money. So it doesn't, to me, it might not be that complicated if you just traded for him.
Yeah. Dan Graziano said the Niners may have voided Ayuk's contract guarantees last year, but they didn't void the contract entirely. If he's on their team in 2026, they have to pay him $27 million. If a team traded for him, that team would have to pay him $27 million. If the 49ers cut him, they don't have to pay him that money, and the team that signs him could theoretically get him for a lot less with a new deal. That's the way I've understood it.
Okay.
So
Okay,
I'm going to
if that's
reach
the
out
case,
to
then
Janetti from Spot Track to see what changed, if anything changed, if they structured something differently to push the base dollars out there to perhaps incent. But he'd have to agree to that, you know? Maybe something happened with his contract recently that makes a trade more possible. Interesting. I appreciate you bringing that up, Aveen. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. If you can only pick one, and that's the deal here, Ayuk or Diggs on this roster. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. I'll let you know if there was a contract change with Ayuk's contract, because that would be significant if they somehow rework the deal to push base salary out further and lower the base salary in 2026. That would seem to be an opportunity for somebody to trade for him rather than wait for him to get released. It does appear to me that, at least at my favorite site, Spot Track, this has changed here recently. And I'm trying to find out if there was a change, if the team changed it and restructured it. I don't know how they do that without Ayuk. Maybe from a cap standpoint, they were able to do that, but they don't want any dead cap money beyond this season if they move on from him. Potentially, that you push dead cap money out further if you restructure and take a lot of the base out this year. So I don't know. We'll see. Tom in Columbia, Diggs or Ayuk? Go ahead.
The game, but I don't think it's fully rooted in reality. But Ayuk is a mental health case through and through. I think Diggs is probably more on the side of maybe some criminal mischief and bad behavior and things like that, but he's a professional athlete and has proven that he can conduct himself as a professional athlete in the season. Ayuk's recent Instagram post doing the poverty level, spreading out the cash and showing the jewelry. That's like the guy shows no growth, and I think that he's just a wild card.
Yeah, what was that? What did he do recently? I'm sorry, I missed it. What was he showing? Some purchase of jewelry on social media?
Yeah, he did a money spread with cash, big thick money spread. And then he showing his jewelry, whatever. But listen, man to man, when you walk into a locker room and you disrespect your 18-month-old son, and you recently got married a year ago last spring, and you're leaving $28 million on the table, I don't care what society you walk in, it's not going to sell well. And I think he's a mental health case. I don't know. Maybe they're starting some kind of gel of big brothers thing there. I don't know. But I think I'd rather err on the side of going with a true pro.
Yeah. The choices are interesting because of Steph's background as well. But yes, there is a lot to the Ayuk decision-making over the last couple of years that should be massive red flag. But we don't know the true relationship and the true whys to all of it. And maybe they do. Who knows? Tom, good call. Thanks. Let's go to Lap. Lap, go ahead. Diggs or Ayuk?
Hey, what's up, Kevin? I'm gonna say Diggs, man. Diggs is proven. He's from the area, man. We can, one of the callers said, we can get a 2-for-1 and bring him here, man. I'm kind of over the Brandon Ayuk, but I think, like you, Kevin, they probably still consider it. Hey, let me ask you a question, Kevin, real quick.
Yep.
Do you see a scenario where Neighbors or Brian Thomas could possibly join the team at some point? Because, Jaden and those guys really want to play together.
Well, I don't think the Giants are going to move on from Malik Neighbors. The guy has true star elite level talent coming off a serious injury. So, at some point, Neighbors just, Neighbors looks to the Brian Thomas thing in Jacksonville. They were trying to deal him in year 2 at the trade deadline. What does that say to you? It says something's not right there. The fact that he's still on the roster and there didn't seem to be a ton of interest in accepting some sort of trade says a lot to me too. So yeah, obviously Neighbors would be a home run if, a couple of years from now, he's able to get to free agency without a 5th year, option being picked up, but I doubt that'll happen. The dude caught 109 balls as a rookie for 1,204 yards, 109. He's elite. We'll see what he looks like coming off the injury. Thanks, Lap. Let's go to Steve in Columbia. Steve in Columbia, Diggs or Ayuk?
All right, I'm going to answer your question. I want to make 2 comments. I'm going with Diggs based on his production on the field the last couple of years. I think waiting for Ayuk to come in maybe a week before training camp is crazy because I don't think he's going to be in shape. Now, the other 2 comments I want to make, you talk a lot about Jaden and his play last year. I agree that he was hurt, but I think you might have been a little jaded in how he played. He's my guy, but he looked off. And it could be because he didn't have enough practice time with his starting receivers, running back, etc. But he was definitely off in his throwing mechanics. And the last thing I'll say is how you teeter-totter a lot about Terry's value to the team, where I can't see, you saw and I saw what this team was like without him on the field last year, right?
Yeah, I mean, they didn't have anything approaching him.
So when you keep saying, that, oh, well, he's not that good, but he's good. I've
never said he's not that good. That's where people like you just completely hear what you want to hear. Like, I've never said Terry's not that good. Never.
What did you
once.
say? Tell me what you said.
I've said, been very consistent on Terry. Terry is a very good receiver in the NFL. But there are 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 guys in the league that I would take over him. He's not elite. He's not, in that upper echelon of receivers, but he's the best we've had in a long time. That's what I've said.
Okay. All right.
No teeter-tottering on my takes on Terry at any point. With respect to Jaden, I agree to a certain level that in the Giant game, it didn't look like the year before. But if you want to go back to the season opener, his very first game against Tampa, and season openers in general tend to be sort of rusty for even the best of quarterbacks. He was outstanding and looked every bit like Jaden Daniels of 2024, in my opinion, against the Chargers and for 3+ quarters against the Bears. The Packers game was a disaster, and in the games in which he played partial games, Dallas, Seattle, and Minnesota, I mean, it didn't look great, but what he had on the field around him, especially in the Dallas and Seattle games, were terrible. Like a lot of it was, you said it, a lot of it was not enough work with Terry before the season started, or, a lot of his guys. And a lot of it was he didn't have a lot of his guys around him for the few moments when he was healthy and could play. But on Terry, no teeter-tottering at all. Consistent.
All right.
Appreciate it. Let's go to Kevin in Arlington. Ayuk or Diggs?
Hi, Kevin. I would go with Diggs. Let's just say the character issue is the wash. They both are risky, but you have to go on most recent production. 2023 is like an eternity ago in football years. And yeah, he was elite then, but he's had a major injury since then. So you go with that, and then you figure out how you're going to get another number one.
Yeah.
In November, December, here's the slogan: tank for Jeremiah. Jeremiah Smith.
I don't want any tanking this year. I can't do any more tanking, and I can't do another 5-12 with all their best players not playing. But Jeremiah Smith from Ohio State is going to be a top 2 or 3 pick next year, no doubt. And they do have to look on Terry too. I'll just add this, and I certainly understand what he's meant to this franchise during some very dark times until 2024. He's a very good receiver, and more than that, he's been an incredible teammate and representative of this franchise. But his own team, with a new front office, basically said with their offer what I've been saying all along. You're really good. We want you. You're the best we have, but you're not elite. You're not an elite receiver, and we can't pay you like one, especially as you're entering your, 30s, early 30s. I mean, that's kind of what I've thought all along. He's really good, but he's just, when you watch the rest of the league, and our fans don't a lot of the time, you realize he's really good, but he's not, in that upper echelon of receivers. He's just not.
Could you explain to me why we weren't more aggressive with Jawan Jennings? He seemed like the perfect complement to Terry. And I just don't there must have been an issue there.
Yeah, especially in the offense that they're about to, unveil. I think he would have been a perfect fit for it. But I think they're probably looking for, true and probably don't see Terry this way anymore. They're looking for a true vertical scare the defense threat, and they think that Ayuk, if he's healthy, could be that for sure. But yeah, Jennings, I think, was asking for too much money and then ultimately signed a 1 year, what was the deal? 12, 13 million with Minnesota? Something
we
like
could
that.
have afforded that.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it. And let's finish up with Billy in Chantilly. Ayuk or Diggs?
Did comment on this last week. I don't know if you recall that
Billy,
than both of them.
What'd you say?
Terry is better than both. Terry's better than both of them.
Okay. So which of the two would you pick,
Both of them
though?
are the invisible men in the playoffs. They call them the invisible men. We went through the playoff stats.
Yeah,
Terry has better playoff
you weren't
stats than both of
100%
them
right
because
about
he's a
that.
caller. I am
Your
right
phone,
about
your
that.
phone's breaking up, Billy. Yeah, I remember what you said last week. You said you kind of refused to pick either one because both of them were terrible playoff players, which I went through their playoff logs, and they weren't really terrible. They just didn't have like outstanding box scores in some of the games. Although Ayuk did have that touchdown catch, which was pretty incredible against the Lions in the NFC Championship game. Yeah, I don't know. Terry today versus Diggs, Terry today versus an Ayuk of a few years ago. Yeah, that wouldn't even be close. It would be close, but Ayuk would be the better player. But again, I understand. I don't know what they'd be getting in Ayuk. As far as this question goes, my assumption would be if they ended up with Ayuk, he checked all the boxes for them. I trust them not to bring an insane person that is physically, impaired and mentally impaired into their locker room. If they sign him, they think he is healthy, mentally, physically, and can give them something they don't have and be a great compliment to Terry McLaurin, which right now I think we'd all agree, and maybe they disagree, but we don't think that they have that on their roster right now. Like I going back to this time last year, more excited about Debo than anything right now that they have on the roster. And I still would have loved to have seen Debo with Jaden for a whole season, Debo with Terry and Jaden for a whole season, Debo with Terry, Jaden, and Eckler for a whole season. I would have loved to have seen what that would have looked like. I think Debo played pretty well considering he wasn't playing with the guys we thought he'd be playing with. All right, done for the day. Back tomorrow. Chris is next.